So please take this time to smash that sub button and hit that like button to lock it in. We really appreciate each and every one of you guys. One last thing. Leave a comment on where you're listening from. I would really love to interact with my fellow supporters. Comment down a hello too, and we will respond. I never thought a coffee date could feel like walking into a high-stakes spy movie. When I swiped right on Dave, his profile struck me as refreshingly low-key, kind eyes, messy hair, a bookshelf background full of travel guides. We set our first meetup at that tucked-away cafe with fairy lights and mismatched mugs. The one everyone raves about but somehow never gets too crowded. I figured we'd trade travel stories, maybe argue over the best late-night snack. Dave arrived calm and polite, ordered a black coffee, and told me he was on a digital detox kick. He said phones were like social crutches, that real connection happened face to face. It sounded intriguing, even noble, so when he asked if I hand over my phone for the evening to prove how serious I was about the date, I did it almost without thinking. By the time I left the cafe, I felt oddly free. No notifications, no endless scrolling, just the echo of his laugh and the taste of strong coffee. I walked home under street lamps, my bare pockets feeling suspiciously empty, but in a good way. I even caught myself smiling, excited for next steps, planning a hike, trying that Thai place he recommended, maybe even a day trip to that lighthouse town. I hopped into bed that night listing everything I wanted to ask him next. I never imagined the next morning would be a crash course in digital horror. My alarm never rang. When I rolled over and squinted at the blanket beside me, I realized it wasn't my phone alarm I heard. It was just my brain replaying it. I reached for the screen and hit a simple pin, but the phone flashed incorrect code. I tried again. Incorrect code. My thumbprint didn't register. Every pattern and code I knew by heart was suddenly wrong. I slapped the side, convinced it was a hardware glitch, then groped for the charger. No luck. My battery icon was frozen. Panic set in fast, contacts, texts, saved photos, banking apps, work notes, even half-written to-do lists were all locked out. I felt like someone had taken my entire life hostage. I flung the blankets off, paced around my tiny bedroom, and Googled why won't my phone unlock on my roommate's tablet. Suggestions ranged from factory resets to professional repair, but one phrase stood out: spyware can change passcodes remotely. My chest tightened. Spyware? That sounded like something out of a Black Ops documentary, not my Friday night coffee date. I remember Dave saying he was into security and system tools like it was a casual hobby. It hit me like a punch that maybe he meant that. I called my friend Jordan, the one who fixes everyone's tech disasters. He answered after the third ring, sounding groggy. After I explained, he offered to meet me at my place with his geek kit. 2 hours later, he arrived with cables and a laptop that looked like it belonged in a NAS control room. We booted my phone into safe mode, but every step required bypass codes and custom scripts. Jordan's fingers flew over the keyboard as he ran network logs and port scans. I hovered behind him, trying not to cry with the idea that my phone was betraying me. Then Jordan pointed at the screen. Look at these IP addresses. Timestamps match exactly when I left the cafe. Outbound connections pinging mysterious servers in 3 different countries. Someone set up a remote shell on your phone, Jordan said quietly. They can see everything: texts, calls, camera, microphone. My stomach dropped. That morning, I'd been texting my sister about the job interview I was nervous for, snapping a pic of my half-eaten cereal, even scrolling through bank alerts. All that was streaming somewhere I couldn't reach. I needed the phone back, but I couldn't face Dave yet. I texted in from my old backup device. Hey, can I pick up my phone? Need it for work stuff. He replied almost instantly. Sorry I crashed last night. It's charging at my place. You can swing by whenever. The little whenever made me feel both angry and terrified. I paced, tried to calm down, then realized I had no choice if I wanted to stop the bleeding. I grabbed my keys and headed to his building, a looming red brick thing with vines climbing the walls. Dave's front door swung open before I could knock. He was holding a vintage film camera and grinned like everything was normal. I stuffed my phone into my bag, barely making eye contact. He said, Hey, hope you slept well. Let me know when you want to hang again. I mumbled thanks and practically ran down the hallway. The encounter was so casual it was surreal. Here I was, 5 minutes from discovering I'd been spied on, and he was talking about our next date like nothing happened. Back in my apartment, I locked the door, powered up my laptop, and started scrubbing the phone. Anti-malware sweeps flagged a custom security module buried deep in the operating system. I deleted every suspicious file, changed every password I could remember, enabled two-factor authentication on all my accounts, and reset my credit cards just in case. The cleanup felt never-ending. Even after a full factory reset, a tiny part of me wondered if stray code was still watching. That night, I lay in bed staring at the blank screen. There was no lesson, no poetic closure, just a buzzing dread that someone had seen me at my most private. Photos of my dog curled up on my lap, messages late at night when I felt lonely, bank notifications that flashed my balance. It was intimacy by intrusion. I deleted every dating app I had, blocked Dave's number on everything, and swore off digital detox pitches forever. Instead of feeling free without my phone, I felt exposed, fragile. Eventually, I replaced the damaged phone with a brand new one, restored only the essentials, and started fresh. I couldn't delete that memory, though. The idea that someone so seemingly gentle could plant spyware under the guise of trust still makes me shudder. Now when my phone buzzes, I check every permission, every connection. I never let it out of my sight. The next time someone suggests handing over my device, I'll walk away. No coffee date is worth losing control of my own world. I always believed you could trust someone who talked about changing the world. It was late summer when I matched with Kai on that dating app, the one I'd been barely using because everyone seemed more interested in selfies than real conversations. His profile was different. Photos of him handing out sandwiches at a food drive, planting trees in a park, building ramps for wheelchairs. His bio said full-time volunteer, part-time dreamer, and I felt this pull like he was someone who actually cared beyond his own reflection. We started chatting about our favorite ways to give back, and before I knew it, we were swapping stories until sunrise. We decided to meet at a community center where he ran a weekend youth program. It was a crumbling building with peeling paint, but inside it buzzed with laughter and chaos. Kids painting murals, teenagers learning to code, adults signing up for ESL classes. Kay was in his element, encouraging a shy kid to try a new color, high-fiving a teenage volunteer for fixing a computer. I watched him and thought, this is exactly the kind of person I want around. He smiled my way, and I felt like I found the secret hero in a real-life comic book. Over the next few weeks, our dates became a ritual. Saturday mornings, we hand out coffee and sandwiches to people waiting at the shelter next door. Sunday afternoons, we packed lunches for a mobile food truck that delivered meals to elders who couldn't leave their homes. He never bragged, but part of me wanted everyone to know I was with someone who had a purpose. He listened when I talked about my job worries and asked about my dreams. I started to believe that maybe this was the kind of connection I had been searching for. Then one evening, between peeling potatoes for soup and sorting donations, he said there was a new helpline taking donations for displaced families overseas. He explained how a small transfer could pay for blankets, diapers, and critical medicines. He seemed so sincere. He'd already sent £50 himself, he said, and shared a screenshot of a bank confirmation. Seeing that, I felt proud. I opened my banking app right at the donation desk in the community center lobby and typed in his account number. He coached me through every step, gently reminding me to double-check the numbers. I did, even though inside I felt this weird flutter, as if I was doing something too vulnerable. That night I lay in bed, heart-worn from doing something good. I told my friends at lunch the next day that I was helping a cause that actually made an impact. They were impressed, asked if they could join next time. I was proud to be the person who brought real action to the table. I owed it to Kai for showing me how easy it was to make a difference. I hadn't thought twice about giving him my bank details. It felt like trusting a friend. A week later, I logged in to check my balance before paying rent. My stomach dropped. The number staring back at me was nearly zero, with an overdraft warning blinking red. I stared at the screen, clicking refresh, thinking it was a glitch. It wasn't. I scrolled through recent transactions and saw dozens of payments, hundreds of pounds each, going to various accounts I didn't recognize. The amounts matched the exact total I had in my savings, and the transaction times lined up perfectly with nights I've been asleep. I felt this wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to sit down. My phone buzzed with alerts. Overdraft fee notifications, insufficient funds. Payment declined. I called my bank in a panic, and after a painful hold, I got through to someone who confirmed my account had been emptied. I asked how this could happen. I'd never shared my PIN, only the account number and sort code for the donation. She explained that with those details in my online banking login, someone could initiate transfers without more verification. I bit back tears as I realized I must have given him more info than I remembered. Then it hit me, the volunteer who asked for my bank details, the one who convinced me to hit confirm under the guise of charity. Kai. I stared at his last text. Let me know when the money goes through. I'll send you some project photos. He'd sent those photos too. Images of children receiving care packages, of families wrapped in blankets. I felt so moved. Now, every one of those pictures felt like a lie. I ended up filing a police report and starting the fraud claim process with the bank. Meanwhile, I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. My rent check bounced. I had to call my landlord, improvise a plan to stay with a friend until things settled. Every time my phone dinged, I braced for more bad news. I kept replaying our volunteer dates in my mind. How he'd taken my hand while we distributed sandwiches. How he'd laughed at my jokes as we stacked cardboard boxes. I felt so betrayed by the version of him that existed for me. Digging deeper, I discovered he'd been under investigation for funneling donations to extremist groups. None of it had gone to the families he claimed. The new helpline was a front, an online campaign designed to look like a grassroots effort, but seeded with false logos and stolen charity IDs. He'd manipulated links to lead me to a spoofed website, but screenshots, edited. The images he sent, pulled off social media and relabeled. I felt sick imagining how many other people he used. All of his volunteering photos, his earnest speeches about community, his kindness, it was just a well-crafted mask. Getting my money back felt like winning a battle but losing the war. The bank managed to reverse some charges, but they couldn't recover everything. I had to pick up extra shifts, skip dinners out, borrow from my family to cover essentials. I'd gone from believing I was part of something good to realizing I'd been a pawn in someone else's twisted agenda. The stress made me second-guess every charitable act afterwards. I found myself hesitating before donating, checking websites and official registrations, casting cynical glances at anyone who asked for my help. Months passed before I felt like I could volunteer again, this time only with established audited charities and always through official channels. I still remember the dull ache in my chest whenever someone mentioned community work, like the scars of that betrayal were woven into me. I deleted my dating profile and decided to focus on friendships and hobbies where trust wasn't the first thing on the table. I kept a sticky note with the bank's fraud hotline by my computer, a constant reminder that a warm smile and a heartfelt story can be the easiest way to steal someone's future. Looking back, the worst part wasn't losing money. It was losing the idea that doing good could be simple and pure. Kelly taught me that every act of kindness can be manipulated if you hand over too much trust. Now I'm more careful, more guarded. I donate through official links, verify every request, and keep my personal info locked down. I still want to make a difference, but I'll never stop double-checking who's behind the cause. I thought I've landed a real catch when I matched with Diana. Her profile was a college of gallery openings and vintage film stills, the kind of aesthetic I'd always admired but never met in real life. She messaged first, asking about my favorite art movement and sharing a photo of her sketchbook. Her tone felt genuine, curious, like she actually wanted to know me. After a week of late-night chats about surrealism and music, she suggested we meet at her studio, a loft space downtown that doubled as her workspace. I was thrilled. The studio was a sprawling former warehouse with sky-high windows and paint-splattered floors. I felt like Alice stepping into Wonderland. Tubes of oil paint everywhere, half-finished canvases leaning against the walls, and a faint smell of turpentine in the air. Diana offered me herbal tea and walked me through her latest project. A series of intimate portraits, she said, explored identity in the digital age. I complimented her brushwork, asked about her inspirations, and she lit up when I mentioned my interest in film photography. It was exactly the connection I hoped for. As weeks went by, our studio dates became routine. I'd bring snacks, she'd fire up the tea kettle, and we'd trade critiques while she worked on layered charcoal sketches. One evening, she handed me a stack of papers to sign, a non-disclosure agreement. She explained she was developing a private collection of collaborative pieces, and to protect the concept, she needed me to agree not to share photos or details. It felt a bit formal, but I trusted her. After all, artists need to guard their ideas, right? Signing the NDA, I felt like I'd crossed into an exclusive circle. Each visit, she showed me new drafts, a portrait with eyes that seemed to glow, another that captured a moment of laughter frozen in graphite. She asked me to record feedback in a private drive she set up and to delete any snapshots I took once the project was over. I gladly complied. It felt thrilling to be part of something secret, creative, off the beaten path. I started referring to her as my artist friend in text to my own circle, brimming with pride at being in on this clandestine collaboration. One night, after a long session of mixing pigments and swapping playlists, I left the studio clutching a flash drive she'd given me. She said it contained an early digital mock-up of her show layout, floor plans, lighting angles, sample prints. Again, I promised to keep it private. I got home late, plugged the drive into my laptop, and saw a dozen folders labeled by date. They were full of photos, some of them featuring me, but others showing women I didn't recognize in bedroom settings, handed selfies that felt like stolen moments. My heart skipped a beat. Why were these on the drive? I sent her a message. Hey, these pics, are they part of the project? She replied that they were references, study material for exploring themes of intimacy and consent in our digital era. She said it was all ethical, scraped from public posts under Creative Commons licenses. Something about that explanation felt off, but I shrugged it aside. Art could be messy, and she knew her stuff. Plus, I didn't want to seem paranoid after all. I'd signed an NDA, and up until now it had been nothing but exciting. Over the next few days, I noticed her working late nights, the loft lights staying on until dawn. She became secretive with her phone, slipping away to talk quietly on calls I couldn't hear. When I asked about the mock-ups, she said that the show was going to include AI-generated portraits layered over real images to challenge viewers' perceptions. She promised she'd include my sketches in the final exhibit. I felt special. She was trusting me with her vision, but a knot in my stomach started to grow. Then I saw an online ad. It was a dark webpage advertising custom intimate videos, promising content of anyone you wanted based on real faces. I clicked, thinking it was some creepy deepfake novelty, but it asked for a name and sourced photos. A chill ran down my spine as I scrolled further and saw Diana's name in the footer. The site credited creative direction by Diana Cole. The phrasing matched her. My chest tightened. I realized the stolen selfies on my flash drive had been the raw material for something depraved. I messaged her. What's this site about? She replied hours later, cool and measured. It's my side gig, exploring AI and art. Totally above board. I pressed her. But it's selling private videos of people. She said it was experimental, a commentary on privacy. She insisted no real identities were used. The AI generated everything. I asked if those folders on the drive were included. She didn't answer. I felt sick. The next day, I went back to the loft under the guise of reviewing layout notes. The door was ajar, the air thick with the smell of coffee and worry. On her desk lay a laptop open to a dashboard showing dozens of revenue streams from user requests fulfilled. Each entry was a name, a price, a timestamp. Some of the faces matched the strangers I glimpsed on the flash drive. Others were women from my social media circles, friends, acquaintances, even distant classmates. It hit me that Diana was fueling a content mill, scraping images, producing deepfake intimate scenes, and selling them behind the NDA as artistic critique. I stood frozen. The betrayal stung deeper than losing money or data. This was about people's faces, their dignity, repackaged and sold as simulated content. I grabbed my bags, slipped an external drive inside, and fled. On the street, I felt the weight of the NDA like shackles. If I spoke up, I'd be violating our agreement. I'd promised secrecy, but what she was doing wasn't art. It was predation. That night, I wrestled with the NDA and the truth. Finally, I realized that her twisted project couldn't stay hidden. I contacted a lawyer, shared everything. The website link, the revenue dashboard, the folders I'd copied. We filed a complaint and alerted the hosting service. It felt risky, like I was stepping into a legal minefield. But staying silent meant letting her keep harming people. The next weeks blurred into hearings and depositions. I sat in sterile rooms under harsh lights, recounting every studio visit, every signed page of the NDA. Diana's defense argued artistic freedom blurred lines of consent. When I testified about the stolen photos, the judge paused on my flash drive screenshots. It felt surreal standing there pointing at images of my own face, knowing dozens of strangers had paid to see a manufactured version of me and others. Eventually the site was taken down. Diana faced charges, and the content mill collapsed. I lost the easy comfort I felt around art, replaced by a vigilance I never asked for. Friends asked if I regretted signing the NDA. I told them it was the price I paid to stop her. Now I avoid secret projects and tiny print. I read every clause before I sign anything. These days, I stick to open galleries and public workshops where trust is earned in daylight. Every time I pass a quiet studio or see an NDA pop up in my email, I feel a pang of old betrayal. I still sketch and snap photos, but I keep them locked down. I learned the hard way that creativity can be a mask for manipulation and a promise of privacy can be a trap. The real masterpiece here isn't on any gallery wall. It's the lesson that some secrets are worth spilling. I never thought a simple switch of messaging apps could cost me my career. It started when I matched with Joey on that dating site. His bio proclaimed him a digital nomad living the dream, hopping between Bali beach huts and Barcelona rooftops, typing away on a laptop with the sunrise in the background. I'd been stuck in my first office job for 6 months, craving freedom and fresh air, so his lifestyle felt like a promise of something better. When our first coffee didn't end in awkward small talk, but in genuine excitement over our favorite podcasts and side hustles, I figured this could be my ticket to a life less ordinary. By the second date, Joey suggested we ditch the usual texting for a private app he swore was more secure and feature-packed. He said it was what all true remote pros used: encrypted chats, disappearing messages, video calls that looked like Hollywood productions. I downloaded it on a whim, telling myself a new app was a small price to pay for insider tips on hopping between time zones and charging rent in crypto. When I opened it, the interface glowed in dark mode, and I felt an instant rush of belonging, as if I'd just been handed a VIP pass to his world. At first, the app was everything he promised. We messaged about weekend plans, shared links to travel blogs, and he showed me snapshots of co-working spaces in Lisbon. There was even a secret thread feature, which he explained was perfect for project discussions or personal stuff. Every time I opened that hidden chat, my heart did a little flip because it felt like he was letting me behind the scenes of his digital empire. I didn't think twice about how he convinced me to leave the safety of my standard messenger. Things got weird when he started inviting me into group chats with his team. I assumed it was part of some remote consultancy he was ghostwriting for, but there was no stable pattern. One day it was designers, the next it was coders, then marketers. The messages would pop up at odd hours, a rant about strategy at 3 in the morning, screenshots of client emails, sometimes even meeting notes with real company names and financial figures. He told me to treat all as confidential, that I was part of an exclusive circle. I liked feeling included, so I didn't question why a guy I barely knew was sharing private corporate conversations with me. 2 weeks in, I got a message from someone in one of those group chats. Someone I recognized as my coworker, Emma, from the marketing team I'd left just days before. My stomach dropped when I saw her name pop up along with, "Hey, is this really you?" and a screenshot of my conversation praising his so-called secret tech hacks. I stared at it, confused, until another ping came from my old boss's email address, asking why I was disclosing company plans to an unknown party. Panic hit me like a freight train. Joey had been leaking everything. I tried to text Joey for an explanation, but he was suddenly offline. By the time I called his number, it went straight to voicemail. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email from HR at my former firm. They had full transcripts of chats, client proposals, pricing negotiations, and they concluded I was the leak. Within hours, they'd sent me a formal termination letter citing unauthorized disclosure of proprietary information. I felt like I was living someone else's nightmare. I had been the model employee, never late, never a complaint. Then overnight, I became the traitor who handed over secrets to a stranger. After I shut my laptop in my empty apartment, I sank onto the couch and tried to trace my steps. How had I not seen this coming? The private app was a black box. I trusted Joey when he said it was secure for his digital nomad lifestyle, but I never stopped to think he might not be who he said he was. I should have questioned why so many random professionals were in those chats, why real client data was being tossed around in a dating app spinoff. Instead, I let the lure of his lifestyle blind me to obvious red flags. In the days that followed, I scrambled to salvage my reputation. I emailed references, begged old managers for character testimonials, even reached out to IT security contacts to see if any of the logs could prove I was a victim of digital sabotage. But corporate HR departments move fast, and I had already become the scapegoat for a hack they believed was inside my own device. The dating app where I met Joey offered no help, and the private messaging platform had no visible support team to report the breach. I felt completely abandoned. I've been unemployed ever since. Resumes feel like confessions, each interview a reminder of the mess labeled under my name. I closed that private app account and deleted all trace of it from my devices. I still check my phone when it buzzes, half expecting another email accusing me of wrongdoing. Trust used to come easily for me. I let people into my life with an open heart and an unsuspecting mind. Now every friend request, every new platform, every suggestion to upgrade feels like a trap I could fall into. Sometimes I scroll through our old chat history stored in the app archive. Joey's messages, the secret threads, everything he shared about his glamorous life. I wonder how he picked his targets, moved from one victim to the next, how many careers he's ruined by leaking secrets. I'm not sure I'll ever get a clear answer, but I know one thing. I'll never let someone ask me to switch to a private app without triple checking every detail. The next time a stranger tries to pull me into an exclusive digital circle, I'm walking in the opposite direction. It's a small comfort in a world where a swipe and a click can turn your life upside down. It started when I matched with John on that dating app. I was immediately drawn to his profile photo of a rustic cabin surrounded by pine trees. He said he was recently separated, looking for company and support while he sorted out his divorce. I'd always been sympathetic to people going through tough times, so when he offered me a weekend stay in his secluded getaway, I thought it'd be sweet, fresh air, long hikes, a chance to decompress together. Driving out to his place felt like stepping into a postcard. The road wound through dense forest, the only sounds my car tires crunching over gravel and birds chirping overhead. When I pulled up, the cabin looked exactly like the photo. Dark wood siding, a stone chimney, and windows that reflected the canopy of leaves above. He greeted me at the door with a warm smile and 2 mugs of steaming tea. Inside, the space was cozy, plush sofas, a wood-burning stove, pictures of smiling family faces lined on a shelf, and an array of houseplants catching the afternoon light. That first night, we cooked chili together in his tiny kitchen and laughed over stories about our childhood pets. I felt comfortable enough to let my guard down after all. He'd invited me into his personal sanctuary. Before bed, he showed me to the guest room, complete with a soft quilt and a small bookshelf. He encouraged me to relax, stay as long as I liked, and let him know if I needed anything. I closed the door behind me and sank into the mattress, thinking it was one of the nicest gestures I'd ever experienced. At dawn, I woke to the slow drip of sunlight through the curtains. I reached for my phone on the bedside table, but it powered up strangely. Apps opening on their own, a faint glare that looked like a camera feed preview. My heart skipped a beat when I saw a tiny red dot in the corner of the screen, like a recording indicator. I tapped it away, convinced it was a glitch. I dressed and wandered downstairs, planning to grab coffee before he woke up, but the kettle was already on. He smiled when I appeared, acting as if he'd been expecting me. Over breakfast, he asked about my dreams the night before. I chuckled and said they'd been weird. He replied softly, "I always keep an audio recorder by the bed in case I wake up talking in my sleep." His explanation felt plausible in that cozy setting. I shrugged and told him I sometimes sleep talk, too. He offered me fresh cinnamon buns from the counter, and I leaned back in my chair, still feeling safe. The next day, we went for a hike through nearby trails. He carried a small backpack loaded with snacks and a portable speaker. We reached a clearing by a rocky stream and paused to take in the view. While I fiddled with my camera, he sat on a boulder, fiddling with his phone. As we headed back, I noticed he'd swiped my camera from my bag and was scrolling through my last night's photos. I laughed it off when he showed me a picture of me stretching in my pajamas, but inwardly I felt a hint of unease. I brushed it aside as casual curiosity. That evening I decided to retreat early, planning to watch a movie on my tablet in bed. I climbed the stairs past a dim hallway lit by wall sconces and settled under the quilt. The tablet flickered, then glitched, opening the camera app instead of Netflix. When I tapped the screen, I saw a live video feed of the guest room from an angle I didn't recognize. My breath caught in my throat. I locked the door behind me, then inched closer to the feed, noticing the little black dot at the top, some hidden camera in the ceiling corner. I realized every move I made had been watched. I tapped the screen frantically, trying to disable the feed, but an alert popped up. Stream active. My blood ran cold. I scrambled out of bed, phone clattering on the floor as I sprinted into the hallway. Every door was unlocked. I burst into the living room where John was reclining on the sofa, sipping wine, as if nothing was wrong. My voice trembled as I demanded an explanation. He shrugged, setting his glass on the table, and said, "I like to make sure my guests feel safe. I've installed cameras everywhere just in case something happens." Anger and panic surged. I felt exposed in the place I thought was a refuge. I lunged for my bag, grabbed my keys, and ran for the front door, ignoring his calls behind me. The forest seemed darker on my way back to the car, the chirps and rustles now menacing. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and peeled out of the driveway before he could catch up. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the wheel. When I got home, I called the police and spent the night filing a report describing every detail I could remember. The following morning, the detective told me the cabin was rigged with high-end surveillance. Cameras in the bedroom, hallway, kitchen, even hidden in the living room potted plants. Worse, the feed was broadcast live to an online site that carried hundreds of viewers at any given time. The officer said John had a history, reports from other travelers, but no arrests yet because people hesitated to come forward. I realized how close I had been to having my most private moments on display for strangers. It took weeks to shake off the fear. I changed my locks, installed cameras in my own apartment, and hired a security consultant to sweep my devices for spyware. Every time I close my eyes, I see that blinking red recording dot. I still hesitate before I trust anyone offering a spare room or a safe space. The cabin that once seemed like a peaceful retreat is now a symbol of betrayal, a reminder that intimacy can be weaponized. I learned that some invitations hide surveillance, and the best way to protect yourself is to assume every corner might be watching. I never expected a weekend getaway to turn into the creepiest invasion of privacy imaginable. I matched with John on that dating app, the one with endless bios full of workout selfies and vacation snaps. His profile stood out, a photo of a rustic cabin with smoke curling from the chimney tucked into a forest clearing. He said he'd just separated and needed company to help him through the rough patches. I figured I could use a break too, so when he invited me to stay at his cabin for the weekend, I jumped at the chance. Fresh air, starry skies, and someone to share the silence with sounded perfect. The drive out there felt like a road trip from a coming-of-age movie. I blasted my favorite playlist as the city faded behind me and trees crowded the horizon. When I finally turned onto the rutted lane leading to his place, my heart did a little flip. The cabin looked like a scrapbook image: dark pine siding, a wraparound porch, wildflowers tumbling down the front steps. John greeted me wearing flannel and a friendly grin that made me think he really did need a friend more than I needed a new adventure. Inside, everything felt warm and lived in: soft rugs, a crackling fire in the stone hearth, stacks of books and board games on an end table. He poured us cocoa from steaming mugs and we settled onto the sofa, talking about our favorite childhood memories and why long-distance hiking was on both our bucket lists. Later, he showed me to the guest room down the hall, where the windows framed a view of moonlit pines. He told me to make myself at home and let him know if I needed anything. Then he tucked me in with a lamp casting a soft glow and closed the door behind him. I felt safe, almost lulled to sleep by the gentle patter of rain on the roof. Morning came with the scent of pancakes and fresh coffee. I wandered downstairs in my pajamas to find John flipping flapjacks and humming to himself. He asked how I slept, and I told him it was the best night's rest I'd had in months. He grinned and said he had a baby monitor he liked to keep by the bed just in case he needed to check on guests. Nothing creepy. He said, just old habits. I nodded and mentioned I sometimes talk in my sleep, so it was fine. I took my plate to the porch and sipped coffee as mist drifted through the trees, feeling more relaxed than I had in ages. That afternoon, we hiked a nearby trail to a hidden waterfall. We laughed when I slipped on a wet rock and he helped me up, his hand steadying me against the rushing water. On the way back, we chatted about our families, our dreams, and how weird it felt to trust someone so quickly. He told me relationships were risky but rewarding if you let yourself be vulnerable. I let my guard down completely, sharing secrets about my fears and hopes, texting friends that this was the perfect escape. That night, I decided to watch a movie on my tablet before bed. When I opened it, the streaming app crashed, and instead of my show, the camera app popped up. A live feed stared back at me, showing the very corner of the guest room where I'd just unpacked. My pulse spiked. I tapped the screen, but the feed stayed live, and I saw a tiny red icon in the corner, recording. My hands shook as I shut the tablet off and scrambled into the hallway. Every door I passed was slightly ajar. Nothing was locked. My heart pounded as I reached the living room, where John was sitting in an armchair reading by lamplight, acting like everything was normal. I demanded to know why my room was being recorded. He looked up, his expression calm, and said he installed cameras everywhere so he could monitor for safety reasons. One, to make sure his guests were okay, especially since it was his first time hosting after the separation. He said the cameras only turned on when motion was detected. Just like a baby monitor, he insisted. I felt the blood drain from my face. My privacy had been shredded in this place I thought was a sanctuary. I turned to leave, but he reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder as if trying to steady me. "You're safe here," he said softly. His voice felt like ice. I yanked my shoulder away and grabbed my jacket from where I'd tossed it by the door. I didn't care about manners or my phone. Whatever I left behind wasn't worth staying another second. I barreled down the porch steps and fled to my car, rain-soaked and trembling, my keys jutting in my palm like the only solid thing in the world. Driving away, I kept telling myself it was over, but a gnawing fear settled in my stomach. I wondered how long he'd been watching, what moments of my life he recorded. Had he seen me at my most vulnerable, lying in bed talking to myself? Did he have recordings saved somewhere, streaming to strangers he invited? I reached home late at night, soaked through, and sent a text to a friend. Help. She arrived with blankets and coffee, listening as I recounted every detail. Together we called the local sheriff's office to file a report. It turned out John had rented the cabin under multiple aliases, leaving behind guests who complained of missing items or strange whispers in the night. The surveillance feed had been linked to a private website that required a subscription. Hundreds of lurkers logged in to watch his guests without their knowledge. Police raided the cabin the next week and found cameras hidden in smoke detectors, light fixtures, even behind bookshelves. They uncovered hard drives full of footage, filing charges for unlawful surveillance. After that, I installed security cameras in my own apartment, changed my phone passwords, and stopped sharing my location for every date. I still have nightmares of a little red dot blinking in the darkness, reminding me that places labeled safe can be traps. Trust doesn't come as easily now. I question every invitation and double-check every lock. But most of all, I've learned that kindness can be a disguise, and that sometimes the people who say they need comfort are the ones who plan to take it all away. Behind the scenes at a Milan shoot, studio portraits with dramatic lighting. Her bio said she was an up-and-coming model working on a self-funded creative portfolio project. I'd always been into fashion and photography, so when she messaged me asking about local studios and lighting setups, I was hooked. We met the next afternoon in a converted warehouse gallery downtown. The walls were painted charcoal, and huge prints hung from the ceiling on steel cables. She greeted me wearing a simple white tee and high-waist trousers, hair slicked back, and carried a leather portfolio case. I felt both starstruck and strangely comfortable. There was something real in her voice when she talked about art direction and conceptual shoots. Over cold brulettes, she laid out her vision, a series of fashion editorials blending street style with digital art projections, all shot in unexpected urban locations. She needed funding for equipment rentals, model fees, and post-production work. She said she'd already invested her own savings, but backing from a knowledgeable supporter would elevate the project. She asked if I would contribute £5,000 in exchange for a producer credit, early access to the final images, and invitation to the gallery opening. It felt simultaneously generous and exclusive, like I was being handed a backstage pass to her world. I'd never put that much money into anything non-essential, but I convinced myself it was worth it. I could write it off as supporting an artist friend, and honestly, I loved the idea of Madaha on my arm at an opening, cameras flashing. I transferred the funds through a private payment app she recommended. She sent a confirmation screenshot with her project's name, Neon Shadows Collective, and told me to expect monthly progress reports. The weeks that followed were a dream. She sent me mood boards full of neon graffiti, flames reflected in mirrored sunglasses, and models draped in sculptural coats. She invited me to a location scout session in an abandoned car park, where we drank takeout espresso and brainstormed shot lists. She introduced me to her small crew, an assistant stylist, a digital artist coding projection patterns, and an indie filmmaker documenting the process. I felt like the lead character in an art house film, giving notes on framing and color palettes. Then the delays started. First, one of the cameras got stolen on set. Next, a lighting rig malfunctioned and set a tarp on fire. She sent videos of charred plastic and blacked out prints, promising she was handling insurance claims and ordering replacements. My messages were met with sincere apologies and new ETA dates. Every update had a photo attached, a wrinkled contract, a new location permit, a shipping confirmation for film stock. I almost believed I'd stumbled into the messy but exhilarating life of a hands-on creator. 2 months in, I noticed her posting less on social media. Her feed, once a sleek mosaic of behind-the-scenes snaps, became sparse. The website for Neon Shadows Collective suddenly displayed a coming soon placeholder. When I texted her asking for a progress video, my messages went unread for days. Then they bounced. The payment app refunded the $5,000 transfer to my pending transactions folder, labeling it disputed. My heart sank. I tried calling her studio number. It rang, but nobody answered. I emailed the address on her domain registration. 6 days later, I got an automated bounce back. Panic set in. I searched company's house records for Neon Shadows Collective. No such entity existed. The assistant stylist I'd met on location answered my voicemail once and said she hadn't heard from Mrnightmare in weeks. The digital artist's Instagram handle redirected to a private account with 0 posts. It felt like every trace of the project had been scrubbed. Determined to get answers, I went to the abandoned car park where we'd scouted. The place was fenced off, signed words warning of demolition. The murals we'd admired were painted over. I called out Madaha's name into the dusty air and heard only my echo. I felt the weight of all the times I bought her coffee, carried her gear, and praised her vision. Each memory now felt like a carefully rehearsed scene from a con. I reached out to the gallery where she'd first shown me around. The assistant there looked at me blankly. They'd never heard of Neon Shadows Collective and had no record of a booking. The photographer whose prints lined the walls that day turned out to be a volunteer who helped wrestle frames into place. She had never spoken to Madaha outside that afternoon. Every person I talked to seemed like a ghost, a loose thread on a tapestry that vanished the moment I tugged. The worst part hit when I checked my bank account. The disputed refund never cleared. My balance was still £5,000 lighter. I called my bank, but they told me I had authorized the payment and now the transfer was final. I obtained a copy of the transaction receipts and discovered the account belonged to a shell company registered overseas. It felt surreal, like I'd been tricked by an illusionist whose only trick was erasing every record of herself once she had what she wanted. I launched a small claim action, but jurisdiction issues and obscure corporate registrations made it a nightmare. The legal fees alone threatened to triple my losses. Meanwhile, Madaha's social media accounts vanished entirely. Her modeling agency website still published an old headshot under her real name, so I reached out there. They said she'd left the agency last year to go freelance. They had no current contact details. I felt like I was chasing a mirage across the internet, leaving virtual footprints that led nowhere. I stopped trusting slick portfolios and promises of creative ventures. My camera gear stayed in its case unused. I kept replaying our location scout that final afternoon, or asking me if I minded muddy boots, or smile when I suggested a new angle the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. Everything about her was professional, charismatic, convincing. I told myself this was just part of the hustle. I never dreamed it was a hustle of the most ruthless kind. In the end, I had to accept that the money was gone. There would be no gallery opening, no glowing reviews in Vogue, no neon-lit photos on my wall. The only souvenirs I kept were the muddy footprints on my boots and the ghost images burned into my memory. I closed the file on Neon Shadows Collective and deleted every email thread, every half-finished draft of texts I composed her. Now, whenever a freelance creative suggests an investment opportunity, I brace myself. I read every small print. dig up company records, cross-check domains. I learned the hard way that promises of art and ambition can cloak the slickest scams. And though the world is full of genuine artists and visionaries, I'll never swipe right without expecting the unexpected. I matched with Coco on a casual chat app, drawn to his calm smile and his bio that said trained therapist offering free sessions. After months of feeling like I was drowning in my own thoughts, work stress, family drama, the constant churn of anxiety, I figured a few conversations with someone neutral might help. I didn't think it would cost me my privacy. Our first call was on a Sunday evening. He had this gentle voice that made me feel instantly heard. As we talked, he asked me to share the things that kept me up at night, my self-doubts, my loneliness, my fear that I'd never get ahead. I spilled out worries about my shaky performance review at work, the fight I had with my sister, and the guilt I felt for not being there for my friends. He nodded sympathetically, occasionally typing notes I couldn't see, promising we'd work through it together. By week 2, our sessions were twice a week. He taught me breathing exercises and cognitive reframing techniques. I started journaling again, logging my mood swings and small victories. I told a few close friends that I found an amazing therapist who wasn't charging a dime. They were skeptical. How could someone offer professional help for free? But I was too happy with the progress to care. I felt my worries loosen, like a tight knot unraveling in my chest. Then came the request that felt harmless enough. He said that to understand my patterns better, he needed me to record our sessions. He asked me to upload audio files to a secure folder he'd set up. It sounded reasonable. Professionals often record sessions to review later. I agreed and began sending him voice memos and session recordings. It felt strange at first to hear my own anxious whispers and trembling voice, but I trusted him. He used those recordings during our calls, pointing out recurring themes and suggesting homework. A month in, he suggested we move our chats off the app to a private email address. More privacy, he said. He even had me set up a separate account just for therapy notes. I followed his advice without hesitation. I was invested in climbing out of my mental hole, and if it took creating a new inbox, I was fine with that. Every day I'd send him updated mood logs, photos of my handwritten journal pages, and sometimes a quick voice clip about how my day went. One evening, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. My heart raced when I saw the first few messages. Screenshots of my diary entries, my journal cover, lines highlighted in red pen. Then came the blackmail note. I know how you really feel when you think no one understands. If you don't do exactly what I say, I'll share these feelings in videos of you crying to everyone in your contact list. My vision blurred as I scrolled. There was even a short clip of me, head in hands, sobbing into my pillow after a breakdown at my desk. I covered my mouth, unable to believe this was happening. I tried calling Coco on the therapy email. Nothing. I texted the original chat app. He blocked me everywhere. My nightmares were now evidence. The next message listed demands. Send in £5,000 via a cryptocurrency wallet, schedule sessions exclusively on his timeline, and never tell a soul. I stared at the screen, stomach twisting into knots. I'd gone to him for help, bared my soul, and now he was using my vulnerability against me. Panic set in. I closed my eyes and tried to think. If I paid, would he disappear with my money and even more data? If I refused, would he make good on his threat? I contacted a friend and begged her to look up the wallet address. We reported it to the police, but cyber extortion cases move slowly. Meanwhile, every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, half expecting another message outing my darkest moments to my parents, my boss, my best friends. Work became unbearable. I was convinced my colleagues had seen those clips. I avoided my team chat, pretended my microphone was broken on every video call. At night, I lay awake imagining a viral post with my tears captioned and shared across social media. My anxiety spiraled back to square one, only worse because now I felt also stained by shame and fear. Eventually, I took a small step that felt huge. I mailed my boss and confessed something awful had happened, that I was being blackmailed and I needed a day off to sort it out. She responded with concern, offered support, and assured me confidentiality. It was one of the hardest admissions I'd ever made, but it relieved a part of the terror buried inside me. My boss connected me with an employee assistance program and a cybersecurity specialist. With professional help, I traced the video clip's metadata back to the cloud folder I'd set up. It was gone. It deleted everything. but the specialist helped me recover shards of files, enough to show the police that this was malicious extortion. Detectives flagged the cryptocurrency address and seized some of the funds before they were cashed out. It wasn't all of it, but it was something. Coco was never found. The domain registration for the private email led to a now-defunct web host, and the original chat app account had vanished. I'd never learned his real identity. In the months since, I've rebuilt my sense of safety in bits and pieces. I switched to a different therapist, this time in person, licensed, with clear boundaries and no private inbox. I froze my credit, changed every password, and learned to encrypt sensitive files. My journal sits in a locked drawer now. I still write in it but no longer share every page. I practice boundary setting, saying no to any request that feels weird, especially if it involves data or recordings. I tell people that therapy can save you, but also that you should always vet the professional, check credentials, and never hand over files that could be used against you. I hated how violated I felt, how a place of healing became a weapon pointed right at my heart. But I also learned how strong I could be in the face of fear. I clawed back some control, piece by piece. My anxiety still flares up, but now I carry the memory of that blackmail as a reminder. Vulnerability is courageous, but trust must be earned one boundary at a time. No more free offers from strangers, no more secret folders, and no more silence when I feel something's off. I'll never forget what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. I matched with Lisa on that new art-focused app. Her profile was full of moody studio shots. Canvases leaning against exposed brick walls, and I was hooked. She messaged first, asking about my favorite painters and inviting me to her rooftop loft for a collaborative bio-art experiment. I was into creative projects, so when she said she needed a tiny DNA sample to personalize the piece, I didn't hesitate. I imagined living art that literally contained my own cells. The first time I climbed the narrow metal staircase to her loft, I felt like I was entering a secret world. The space was flooded with late afternoon light, walls splashed with bold colors, and half-finished sculptures perched on wooden crates. Laser-cut wooden panels cast shadows across a huge tarp on the floor, where she was setting up a workstation of petri dishes, tweezers, and pipettes. A faint hum from a mini incubator filled the air. I handed her my cheek swab, just a quick row on a cotton stick, and watched as she delicately transferred it into a test tube labeled Subject 07. It felt futuristic and kind of thrilling. Over the next few weeks, I stopped by regularly. Lisa wore a paint-splattered lab coat and played ambient jazz on hidden speakers. Each session, she showed me a new layer of the experiment. A collage of cells dyed in fluorescent ink, a 3D printed mold seeded with my cells, and finally a glass sculpture that glowed under ultraviolet light. She said it was an exploration of identity at the microscopic level, a metaphor for how we carry our past with us in every cell. I posted photos to my story, bragging about my role as art's living canvas. It felt like I was part of something bold and original. Then one evening, she asked me to sign a consent form for data purposes. She explained that the sample would be de-identified and used only for this project. The form was dense, full of scientific jargon, but I breezed through it because I trusted her. I barely skimmed the clause about anonymized data possibly being shared with third-party research partners. A week later, she handed me an invite to the opening reception. The glass sculptures ranged like glowing otherworldly plants, the fluorescent cells visible in petri dishes mounted on pedestals. I was proud to stand beside my own DNA art and watched friends marvel at the biology meets abstract fusion. A few days after the opening, I started getting weird emails. The first one was from a throwaway account, simply a link. I clicked it and saw a table that made my heart stop. A database listing genetic markers, blood type, hereditary conditions, and an email field that matched mine. A name and a reference code appeared in the database. I closed the tab, convinced it was spam. But more arrived, links to marketplaces on that anonymized network that's famous for illegal trade. Each one pointed to a DNA dataset labeled exactly with the test tube number Lisa had given me. I confronted her the next time I visited the loft. She was adjusting a neon lamp next to a half-finished mural when I showed her the screenshots. Her face didn't twitch. She said, "Art is about pushing boundaries, right? I donated some data to fund my next big project." I stammered that selling DNA was illegal and dangerous. She shrugged and said it was completely anonymized, and those sites would never trace it back to a specific person. She acted like I was overreacting. I asked where she got permission to share my genetic code. She smiled, called me knave, and told me to read the small print I'd signed. I tore the consent form out of my bag and pointed at the line about third-party research. She laughed and said research included biotech startups who pay for genetic libraries. Everyone's doing it, she said. It felt like a punch. Biotech bros and black market dealers using my DNA to create God knows what. I stormed out without another word and spent the entire subway ride home glued to my phone, trying to trace the sale sites. They all required cryptocurrency, and the data had already been downloaded thousands of times. Over the next days, I became obsessed. I contacted a legal clinic that helped people with privacy violations. They said it was a murky area since I'd signed a consent form, even if I didn't fully understand it. Tech experts told me there was no way to delete the data once it was out in the wild. I froze my credit, signed up for identity monitoring, and changed every password I had. Still, the idea that anyone could use my genetic information to profile me for insurance, clone me, or even engineer a virus made my stomach churn. I deleted Liz's contact info and uninstalled the art app. I walked past the loft building a week later, half expecting to see her painting neon cells on her windows. The door was boarded up. A for rent sign flapped in the breeze. I texted the gallery that hosted her show. They said she left town without warning, took all of her equipment, and never paid the lighting bill. The building manager found pipettes and half-used petri dishes when they cleaned the space, then tossed everything into a biohazard bin. The entire experiment was gone, but my DNA was still floating through servers in obscure peer-to-peer networks. Now, whenever I hear someone brag about their raw genetic test results or personalized health insights, I cringe. That sense of pride I felt at the opening night has curled into anger and fear. I wonder who's mapped my markers, who owns a piece of my genome, and whether it'll ever come back to haunt me. I still sketch sometimes, but I stick to charcoal and paint, anything that doesn't require giving up a part of myself. I learned that creativity can be a mask for exploitation, and some canvases you shouldn't let anyone paint on. I never thought a quick wedding could become the biggest travel of my life. It all began when I matched with Matt on that travel-themed app. His profile was full of rooftop sunset selfies in Barcelona, street food shots from Bangkok, and a promise that he'd been living abroad for years. He said he had dual citizenship and loved showing people the world, and was fresh out of vacation plans and desperate for adventure. So when he suggested we meet at the old pier cafe with its faded murals and sea breeze, I agreed without overthinking it. When I arrived, the pier smelled like salt and fresh espresso. Matt was leaning on a railing, looking tanned and confident, jeans rolled up at the ankle. He greeted me with a hug like we'd known each other forever. We talked about my dream of quitting my dull office job to work remotely, his stories of teaching English in exotic cities, and how easy life felt when you didn't have to worry about borders. The sunset painted his face golden, and I thought maybe this time I'd finally find someone who shared my wanderlust. Over the next few weeks, our dates took me on a whirlwind tour of the city's hidden spots, a secret garden behind a library, a vintage record shop with vinyl from around the world, a tapas joint with flamenco nights. He told me about his remote job in finance that allowed him to sponsor his partner's visa if we married. When he first mentioned it, I laughed it off. But then he showed me his UK passport and joked about how he'd love me to have the same freedom to travel. It sounded so easy. A ceremony, a short trip to the consulate, and I'd be his legal spouse, able to live and work abroad too. I was smitten. I'd never considered marriage so soon, but it felt romantic, us against the world, ready to pack our bags and chase sunsets wherever we pleased. We picked a small registry office near the pier, arranged a simple ceremony with 2 witnesses, and I borrowed a floral dress from a coworker. The day of the wedding, I woke up buzzing with excitement, convinced I was stepping into a new chapter that hundreds of friends had envied on social media. We exchanged vows that were half laughed and half crying, promising each other everything under the sky. After, we celebrated with churros and hot chocolate, me kissing him under the pirate lights like a movie scene. The paperwork was a breeze. I signed forms and felt like I was just checking boxes. One more signature, one more stamp, and I'd be free to follow him anywhere. Within a month, my visa interview was scheduled. I got the call that everything was approved and I could collect my residence permit in London. I felt I was starting a new life. No commute, no cubicle farms, just me and Matt exploring centuries-old streets and endless green parks. Then things started to shift. Matt grew distant about plans. He said I should move over as soon as possible, that the permit might expire if I waited. I sold my car, packed my belongings, and canceled my lease. I booked a one-way ticket and told my parents I'd see them at Christmas. He met me at the airport curb, smiling but with tired eyes. I lugged my suitcases through departures, imagining our first flat in Notting Hill, weekend markets, and canal walks. In London, everything felt dreamy until the first day I tried to open a bank account. The clerk raised an eyebrow at my visa stamp, asked if I had proof of address and an employment contract. I didn't. Matt said I didn't need a local account yet. I could use his if I needed cash. Next, I tried signing up for the national health system and was told I needed proof of income or savings. I had little of both. He offered to add me to his policy, but then said it would take weeks for the paperwork. Meanwhile, I lay in bed with a cough, unable to see a doctor without paying out of pocket. Work was another hurdle. I spent days searching for remote gigs, graphic design, copywriting, tutoring, but with no local bank or health coverage, no one would hire me. My savings dwindled. I asked Matt if I could get a part-time job, and he scoffed that working illegally could risk both our statuses. I believed him. I didn't want to lose everything we built. As the weeks passed, his remote job turned out to be more like a front. He spent most of his time on his laptop at odd hours, dodging my questions about who he worked for. I tried to meet his colleagues in video calls, but they'd always be in muted rooms or off camera. I started feeling invisible in his life. When I reminded him about our travel plans, he said the visa rules meant I had to stay put for at least 6 months before we could go anywhere together. Bills piled up. I was living off rent and borrowed Wi-Fi at cafes. Messaging my friends back home, my fridge was empty and I missed my old life. I tried opening my laptop one morning and it was gone. He'd taken it for security updates and never returned it. I begged for it back because I had all my photos, my resume, everything on there. He said he needed it to run a compliance check and I'd get it next week. That next week never came. I found myself stuck in a flat I couldn't afford, locked out of basic services, and losing my grip. I realized too late I handed over everything. My lease, my job, my car, even the loose change in my old wallet. I was his wife on paper, but he treated me like a stranger in my own life. When I confronted him, he told me I was overreacting and didn't understand how the system worked. He said if I went back home now, I'd lose my permit and never get another one. I felt trapped. In desperation, I reached out to a local immigrant support group. They told me that marriage visas required genuine relationship proof. Photos, joint leases, shared finances. They saw I had none. They advised I gather any evidence I could and apply for a review. They warned it would be a long fight, but I had to try. I spent nights combing through old emails and texts, looking for any joint receipts or travel bookings. It was brutal to relive how quickly I had fallen. Matt noticed my growing distance and accused me of planning to leave him. He cut me off financially completely, canceled my student loan payments, shut off the utilities, and changed the locks on the door. I wound up couch surfing with sympathetic acquaintances, packing my meager possessions into a backpack each morning. The review process dragged on for months. I slept in shelters some nights, worked odd cleaning shifts under the table, and sent every penny I earned to the support group for legal fees. Matt occasionally texted me threats. If I went to the authorities, he'd report me for visa fraud, he said. I was terrified, but I realized he already had all the cards he needed to shatter my life. Eventually, a pro bono lawyer got my case accepted. They wrote a statement about my situation, proving I had no intention of committing fraud, and that the marriage was more about control than partnership. It took another 3 months of hearings, document requests, and searing grief before the tribunal granted me a special leave to remain independently. That meant I could stay and work without being tied to him. When I opened that letter, tears came so hard I couldn't read the rest. I left the country support group office on a sunny afternoon, my new visa stamped into my passport. I walked down the street feeling lighter than I had in a year. I still didn't know where I'd live next or how I'd rebuild my savings, but I knew I was free. I never got to explore Europe hand in hand with Matt. Instead, I learned that sometimes the dream of freedom can be the very chain that holds you. Now I talk about my story whenever I can, hoping others don't fall for the same quick fix promise. I traded the fantasy of sunlit piazzas for the messy reality of reclaiming my life, and I'd do it all again if it meant keeping my own power. I didn't expect much when I swiped right on Blake. He seemed like a cool guy, the kind of person who might have some interesting stories to share. His profile said he was a wildlife photographer, and I figured that was about as cliche as it gets. He probably spent his days in exotic locations taking pictures of tigers or birds or something. But hey, I was in the mood for a date that didn't involve sitting around some overpriced cafe with bad coffee, so I agreed when he asked if I wanted to go on a moonlit swamp tour. I mean, what could possibly go wrong, right? We met up in this small, rundown town that looked like it was straight out of a horror movie. There were barely any streetlights, and the few that were there flickered like they were about to die. Blake seemed chill enough. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and those kind of rugged eyes that always make you think someone's seen more than they let on. He wore a camo jacket, which should have probably been my first red flag, but I didn't think much of it at the time. He told me it was the perfect night for a swamp tour. Clear skies, a full moon, and all that romantic stuff. So far, so good. We got into his beat-up truck and drove out of the town, heading toward the swamp. The roads got bumpier the farther we went, and I started to feel like maybe I was making a mistake. I don't even know why I stayed along for the ride. Maybe it was because I was already here, or maybe because I didn't want to be rude. Either way, Blake seemed pretty excited about the whole thing, and I was too curious to bail now. The swamp was eerie. As soon as we stepped out of the truck, I could feel the dampness in the air and hear the croaking of frogs in the distance. It was pitch black except for the light from the moon and the occasional flicker of Blake's flashlight. He handed me a life vest and told me to get in the boat. I was a little iffy about getting into some rickety boat in the middle of nowhere, but Blake assured me it was safe. I figured why not? It wasn't like I had anything better to do. Blake rowed us deeper into the swamp. The further we went, the quieter it got. The air smelled like wet earth and decay, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Blake kept talking about the wildlife in the area, but there was something almost too eager in his tone, like he was trying to keep me distracted. He mentioned something about hunting gators for a project he was working on, and that's when it hit me. This guy was more than just a photographer, but it didn't really click at that moment. His story sounded reasonable enough, and I was still a little tipsy from the nerves. Then, as if on cue, Blake stopped the boat. It was silent now, except for the water lapping against the sides of the boat. He pointed to something in the distance, something glowing in the water. I squinted, trying to make it out, a pair of eyes, a reflection. Before I could even fully process what was happening, Blake turned to me with a grin. "You're gonna love this," he said almost too excitedly. I blinked. What's going on? But before I knew it, Blake grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the edge of the boat. I stumbled, trying to pull away, but he was too strong. "You're going in," he said flatly, his tone shifting. I couldn't believe what was happening. My heart was racing now, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. I tried to scream, but the sound was drowned out by the croaking of the frogs. "Blake, what the hell, let go." I managed to shout, but he wasn't listening. With a swift motion, he shoved me into the knee-deep water. The shock of cold hit me instantly, and I gasped as I tried to regain my footing. The water was dark and murky, and I could barely see my hand in front of my face. I panicked, splashing around, but Blake was just standing there, watching. That's when I realized this wasn't some fun moonlit tour. This was a setup. I turned around, ready to scramble back into the boat, but then I heard it, a low, rumbling growl from the water. My blood ran cold. Blake's grin grew wider, almost wicked. "Don't worry," he said, his voice low and eerie now. "They won't bite unless you move." I froze. What the hell was he talking about? My mind raced as I heard the water shift, the sound of something large moving beneath the surface. I knew it was coming. I could feel the gator's presence before I even saw it. The air was thick with tension. My heart was pounding and my legs were shaking, but I wasn't about to let this creep get away with whatever twisted game he was playing. I pushed myself to the side, trying to keep my body as still as possible. I couldn't let myself become bait for some sick hunt. It wasn't until I heard Blake's voice again, his casual tone now dripping with malice, that I realized how far this was going to go. "You're gonna make a great shot," he said, pulling out his camera. "This is gonna be a hell of a picture." I had enough. With a surge of adrenaline, I bolted, pushing through the murky water, scrambling for the boat. Blake's laughter echoed behind me as I pulled myself into the boat, shaking and drenched. I didn't look back, I couldn't. The thought of being used as bait for a gator hunt was too much. I didn't even care that I was still half in shock. I just wanted to get out of there. Blake didn't chase me. Instead, he stood at the edge of the boat watching me silently as I paddled back toward shore as fast as I could. The swamp didn't seem so magical anymore. The moonlit water was just a reflection of my own terror. I was done. There was no way in hell I'd ever go near him again. The next morning, I blocked him on everything. I didn't want to know what his next move would be or what kind of sick person he really was. I couldn't help but wonder how many others had fallen for his game. All I knew was that I had narrowly escaped being part of some illegal hunt, and I wasn't about to let that happen again. Ryan was one of those guys who just had a way of making you feel like you were doing something good for yourself, even when you had no idea what you were getting into. When we matched, his profile said he was a fitness coach, but not in the usual "I'm here to help you lose weight" kind of way. No, Ryan was different. He had this whole thing about unlocking your best self, and I didn't think much of it at first. I was just looking for a bit of motivation, something to push me to actually get in shape. I tried the gym a few times, but I'd never really stuck with it. So when Ryan suggested a personalized fitness plan that would include some high-tech biometric tracking, I thought, why not? The first meeting was over a video call. Ryan was all smiles, talking about how excited he was to help me reach my goals. He asked about my diet, my activity level, and of course what I wanted to achieve. I told him I just wanted to feel better, nothing too serious. He nodded and said he could help with that. He didn't push me too hard. In fact, he made it sound pretty easy. He mentioned that he had a new app that could track everything from my calories to my heart rate to my sleep patterns. Honestly, it sounded a little too good to be true, but it wasn't like I had anything to lose. So I signed up. Big mistake. Ryan sent me a package a few days later. Inside was a small, sleek device that looked like a fancy fitness tracker, along with some instructions to download his custom app. The device was supposed to sync with my phone, collecting all sorts of data as I went on my day. Ryan reassured me it would help keep me on track, and once I started using it, I'd be able to see the progress. At first, it was all pretty normal. I wore the tracker during my workouts, and I started noticing that the app gave me some pretty detailed feedback. It was kind of cool to see how my body was responding to the exercises. But then things started getting weird. It wasn't until a couple of weeks in that I realized how controlling the app really was. I had set some goals for myself. Nothing major, just getting my steps in every day and making sure I stayed within my calorie limit. At first, the app was pretty chill. It just sent me little notifications reminding me to move or to drink water. But then one day I got this strange alert. It told me I had exceeded my safe zone. I was confused. What did that even mean? Ryan had never mentioned anything about safe zones. I figured it was a glitch, so I ignored it. But the next day I got another alert, and then another. This time, it told me that my heart rate was too high while I was doing my regular workout. Ryan texted me right after. "Hey, noticed you went a little above your target heart rate. Remember, we want to stay within the safe zones," he said. I didn't think much of it, but now I was starting to get a bit uneasy. Who monitors someone's heart rate this closely? I told myself it was just part of the process, that I needed to trust this system. But then came the next level of weirdness. One morning, I got an alert before I even got out of bed. It told me I wasn't allowed to get up yet, that I needed to stay within a certain safe zone for a bit longer. It said if I didn't comply, my fitness results would be negatively impacted. I didn't even know how it could track me while I was still in bed, but I followed the instructions. I lay there for another 20 minutes, feeling ridiculous but also kind of trapped. That's when the electric shock started. At first, it was subtle. I felt a slight tingle in my wrist, like when a muscle twitches out of nowhere. I thought it was just my imagination, but then it happened again. This time, it wasn't just a tingle. It was a sharp jolt, enough to make me jump. I immediately checked the app, and sure enough, there was a new message. "You've exceeded your safe zone. Please get back in compliance." The shock wasn't random. It was tied to the app's tracking system. The more I strayed from the app's approved activities, the more intense the shocks became. I was freaking out now. I texted Ryan, asking him what was going on, but he didn't answer right away. Instead, the app sent me another reminder. Your compliance is crucial for progress. Keep pushing. What the hell did that even mean? My body was starting to feel like it was being controlled by this damn app. If I didn't meet certain goals, I'd feel the shocks. If I didn't stay within the safe zone, I'd feel them again. Every time I moved too far out of line, it punished me. I tried to take it off, but the app wouldn't let me. It had synced with the device so tightly that I couldn't even disconnect it from my phone. The app kept telling me to stay on track, as if it was some kind of twisted drill sergeant. And when I tried to ignore it or ignore Ryan's messages, the shocks got worse. It was like it knew I was resisting, like it was trying to break me down until I complied. Things started getting worse the more I used the app. It wasn't just about physical activity anymore. The app started monitoring my sleep patterns too. It sent me a notification one night that my sleep wasn't meeting the optimal standards, and that I needed to wake up and do some light stretching. I had barely slept 4 hours, and now it was telling me to move. I was exhausted, but I felt like I didn't have a choice. So I got up, did the stretches, and went back to bed, hoping I could finally get some rest. But no, this app had more in store. The next day, it tracked everything I ate and even my emotions. If I was stressed or if my heart rate spiked, it would send me a message reminding me to relax and maintain calm. I tried to go on a walk to clear my mind, but once again, the app was right there, sending me alerts about how far I could walk before I was in the unsafe zone. The more I tried to break free, the more the app pushed back, sending me shock after shock until I was too afraid to even think about doing something outside its control. Ryan, of course, was always there with his motivational messages. You're doing great. Keep pushing. This is all part of the process. His words felt empty now, like he was in on the whole thing. I couldn't trust him anymore. It wasn't about fitness anymore. It was about control. The app had me locked into this sick cycle, and the more I tried to fight it, the more it tried to force me to comply. I didn't know how long I could take it, but I knew I had to do something before it got worse. My mind was spinning, but I couldn't take another shock. I had to get away from Ryan and this insane system. It was time to break free no matter what it took. I deleted the app, and the moment I did, the shock stopped. Ryan was still watching, still tracking. I blocked him on everything, but something told me this wasn't over. I never thought a quiet weekend in the mountains could turn into one of the scariest things I've ever been through. I was swamped with work and needed to unplug, so when Serena, this travel blogger I've been chatting with, offered me the keys to her isolated chalet, I jumped at it. Her photos were dreamy wooden beams, big windows looking out at snow-dusted firs, fluffy blankets by a crackling fireplace. I pictured myself curled up with pot cocoa and a stack of books. I packed my bag, grabbed my phone charger, and drove up that winding road, feeling like I'd hit the solo vacation jackpot. The chalet sat at the end of a gravel track, surrounded by silent pines that blocked out the world. No cell signal, no traffic noise, just the whisper of wind through the needles. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, letting the door click shut behind me. The place smelled like fresh cedar and lavender sachets. Candles lined the mantel, and a note in Serena's looping handwriting told me to help myself to the wine rack and firewood. I felt a thrill at how lucky I was getting a free weekend in a spot like this. The first night was perfect. I lit the candles, spread out on the couch, and watched an old movie on my tablet. I was loving how secluded everything felt. In the morning, I made pancakes, slipped into a hoodie, and wandered outside on the porch, breathing in the crisp air. I thought Serena might text me some tips on hiking trails or local spots to check out, but nothing came. Still, I wasn't worried. She'd said she'd be gone for a few days, covering a festival halfway across the country. On day 2, a sliding panel under the stairs caught my eye. It was weirdly snug, almost flush with the wall. Curious, I pressed on it and it popped open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down. Adrenaline kicked in as I flicked on my phone flashlight and padded downstairs. The air was cool, smelling faintly of antiseptic and metal. At the bottom, I found a long corridor, walls lined with stainless steel cabinets and surgical trays. My heart pounded. I felt I had stepped into a hospital back room. I kept moving, more frightened than I'd ever been, but too drawn by the need to know what was happening. A single bare bulb swung overhead, casting flickering shadows on the tile floor. At the end of the hall was a heavy door with a small glass window. I peered through and saw a table draped in white sheets. Blood-stained instruments spread neatly beside it. On the far wall, metal hooks hung from the ceiling, empty but ominous. I pressed my face closer to the glass, my breath fogging it up, and that's when I heard voices. Low, clipped whispers just out of earshot. I backed away, heart hammering, and stumbled upstairs. I tried to stay calm, telling myself maybe it was some old experiment space Serena forgot to mention. But when I looked out the window, I saw two figures in dark jackets slipping through the trees toward a side door. Fear turned cold in my veins. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but there was no signal. I cursed under my breath, realizing I was completely cut off. I crept to the front door, planning to bolt to my car, but then I heard footsteps on the back deck. Panic made me freeze as I watched Serena and another person step inside. She was smiling, a warm, welcoming smile that made my skin crawl. She called out a greeting and I backed toward the door, ready to run. She held up a camera and started talking about her latest vlog, how excited she was to film the interior tour. Her voice had that practiced tone she used online, but everything felt off like the cheer was fake. She motioned me to join her by the fireplace. I shook my head and asked why she'd keep a bloody lab under her own house. Her smile tightened for a second before she laughed it off, saying those photos were from some old cabin she stayed in years ago. She said I was seeing things, maybe the shadows. The other person, tall and silent, hung back near the stairs. I decided I wasn't sticking around to argue. I lunged past Serena, yanked the front door open, and tore down the path toward my car. The drive down the mountain was the worst minute of my life. Gravel sprayed as I shifted gears, headlights cutting through the dark. Every rustle in the trees looked like someone chasing me. I slammed the brakes at the bottom and called the local sheriff's office from a payphone I spotted by a gas station. They told me they'd check the chalet, set officers up the next morning. I kept driving till the sun came up, too wired to sleep. I couldn't shake the image of that operating table or Serena's fake smile. When the deputies finally searched the chalet, they found blood samples in labeled vials, charts pinned to a corkboard tracking guests by date, and a list of names I recognized from her blog comments. It turned out Serena and her partner were harvesting organs for some underground network. There was no lesson here, just sheer disbelief that someone who seemed so chill could be running a full-blown organ mill beneath my feet. I packed my notes and drove home, wrecked and shaken. Now every time I see a chalet pic online, I get a knot in my stomach. I won't go near another blogger's pad again. It all started when I saw that post on my social feed offering free Snuggle sessions. It sounded too good to be true, but after a week of feeling alone in my tiny flat, I clicked the link. The ad was simple, professional color, zero cost, zero strings attached. The profile picture was a soft, focused selfie of someone with kind eyes and a warm smile. I thought it'd be a chill way to decompress after work, just some platonic comfort and maybe a new friend. I booked a session for the next afternoon, excited and a little skeptical, but mostly hopeful. On the day, Alex showed up looking casual in joggers and a hooded jumper, carrying a pair of black boxes tagged mood speakers. They walked in with the confidence of someone who did this every day. The living room was dim, curtains pulled closed, lamps off. Alex set the speakers on the coffee table and explained they'd be synced to my heart rate to adjust the lighting and sound for maximum relaxation. I watched as they plugged cables into my phone and arranged the little devices around the room. Everything felt normal until I saw tiny lenses on the edge of the speakers, blinking red like techie beetle eyes. The session began with a guided breathing exercise, my heartbeat echoing through the speakers as ambient tones swelled and waned. Alex said the system would mimic a real hug, wrapping me in sound and light. I lay back on the couch, arms at my sides, breathing in time with the pulsing glow. They curled up next to me, and their presence was soothing. I let myself drift, muscles unclenching for the first time in months. The world outside faded, and I felt weightless. After about 30 minutes, Alex paused the audio. The room went silent, and for a second I thought they might tuck a pillow under my head or check in. Instead, they pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. The speakers came to life again, but this time a soft, mechanical voice began counting viewers. 0, then 1, 2, 10. My stomach dropped as I realized my most private moments were being broadcast live. Alex's calm composure hadn't changed. It was like watching someone check a score on their phone. I bolted upright, knocking the tablet from their hands. Alex slid back smoothly, almost slipping off the couch. The live counter jumped, 20 viewers. I scrambled for my phone, but the app Alex used was locked with a complicated pattern. Panic washed over me. The room felt too small. I needed to get out to disconnect those speakers. I lunged for a speaker on the floor next to the coffee table, yanked the cable out, and it let out a strangled electronic cry. Alex hissed but stayed still, pressing their palm on the glowing lens to stop the blinking. The feed froze for a moment, then continued on another device, no doubt hidden somewhere else. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. Sweat slicked my palms as I tried to think. My door was behind me, but the couch blocked the way. Alex scooted closer, all warmth gone from their face. They gestured at the other speakers lined along the walls. I realized they'd hidden cams in all of them. They must have scoped my space beforehand. Each moon speaker doubled as a live stream camera. I dropped to the floor and reached for the speaker behind the TV stand, yanked it free from the hardwood. It had a micro SD slot and a small hole that looked like a mic. I jammed my finger in that hole, fingertip bleeding when the glass cut it. Alex hissed again, but didn't move. I ripped the lens out of the frame, cracked circuits sparking. I threw it against the wall. The feed went dark, and for a second the room felt empty. Then a voice whispered from everywhere and nowhere, the same mechanical tone announcing recording paused. I didn't wait for it to restart. I scrambled to my feet and dashed toward the door, flinging it open. Alex paced out behind me, blocking my path in the hallway. Without thinking, I swung my handbag like a baseball bat, smashing it into their shoulder. They stumbled back, surprised. I sprinted straight down the hall and out into the street. Night air hit me like a wave. I leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, listening for footsteps. None came. I wrapped my arms around myself and looked down the block. It was empty, silent except for distant cars. I ran to my neighbor's flat, pounded until someone answered. They let me in without questions. While I stood under harsh kitchen lights, I called the number Alex had used to book. It rang once, then someone picked up on the other end, voice all business, saying they're unavailable. I slammed the phone down. I spent the night at my neighbor's, too jumpy to return. First light, I crept back. My front door had a scuff where someone kicked it. Inside, the speakers were gone, the couch torn. My flat was a wreck. I gathered what I could and moved into a hostel until I found a new place. I deleted every account, changed my locks, blocked every number. I still haven't checked if Alex's site is still live streaming because I'm afraid of what I'd see. Sometimes late at night I swear I hear that soft mechanical voice counting viewers. It wakes me up, leaves me staring at the ceiling, heart thumping. I don't want to know how many eyes were on me, how many people watched me drift between fear and calm. Well, I'll never forget the way tech that promised comfort turned into the worst kind of exposure. And I'll never, ever let someone install mood speakers in my home again. I'd never imagined that a simple coffee date could lead me down a rabbit hole where every dusty trinket in my family box turned into someone else's merchandise. It started when I matched with Jordan on a dating app. Their profile was a mix of vintage photographs and cryptic captions about preserving history. When they mentioned they were building a time capsule and needed contributions of personal mementos, I thought it was charming, maybe even whimsical. Who doesn't like the idea of sealing memories away for future explorers? I agreed to help without a second thought. A few nights later, I found myself at Jordan's downtown loft. Exposed brick walls were lined with shelves packed with oddities, rusty padlocks, weathered letters, fragments of broken jewelry. There was a small ritual altar in one corner, covered in candles and old maps marked with strange symbols. Despite the eerie vibe, Jordan was warm, pouring me tea and insisting I relax. They lay out a vintage wooden box with brass hinges and explained how it would be lowered into hidden city tunnels and rediscovered decades later. I brought my grandmother's silver locket, a faded snapshot of my parents on their wedding day, and a delicate porcelain teacup passed down through generations. Jordan asked me to tell the story behind each object, their eyes bright with enthusiasm. As I spoke about family lore, how my great grandmother wore that locket during the war, how the cup survived my parents' cross country moves, I felt a strange connection. Writing those tales down in their leather bound journal felt like I was weaving my history into something larger. Once the stories were recorded, Jordan carefully placed each item into the box, sealing it with wax and chanting a brief phrase that sounded more theatrical than meaningful. It felt intimate, like sharing secrets with a kindred spirit. Over the next 2 weeks, Jordan and I met several times to finalize the project. It showed me sketches of the tunnel entrance, photographs of the box being waterproofed, and even a mock-up of the Kickstarter page designed to raise funds for an elaborate unveiling ceremony 10 years from now. Everything seemed professional and artful. I watched as Jordan carefully wrapped my items in acid-free tissue, promising they would remain pristine until the capsule's grand reveal. I trusted them completely, proud that my family's past would be part of this avant-garde archaeological art piece. Then the messages started. First, it was a casual mention on social media, a blurry snapshot of my teacup perched on a velvet cushion, tagged with hashtag #TimeCapsuleCurator, and followed by enthusiastic comments about authentic relics. My heart sank when I recognized the writing on the teacup, a tiny chip, and a hairline crack that only I knew. Before I could ask Jordan what was going on, an email arrived from someone named Marcus, claiming to be an occult specialist who had purchased my grandmother's locket at a private auction. He wanted to know if I was aware that my family heirloom was being used in sacred rituals for undisclosed clients. Panic set in. I confronted Jordan over text, demanding an explanation. Their replies were vague, referencing conceptual reinterpretation and immersive audience participation. Jordan apologized for not warning me of the shift, saying the project had grown beyond a simple time capsule and evolved into a profit-driven installation. They'd assured me my pieces were in good hands and that the original plan was still intact. Something about their tone felt rehearsed, like a script they had memorized for investors rather than genuine regret. Determined to get my items back, I visited their loft unannounced. The place was empty, no signs of my trinkets, no candles, just dusty floors and moved shelves. A few cardboard boxes stamped with shipping labels sat by the door. My text messages remained unread. Jordan's phone went straight to voicemail. That's when I realized I had been played. Those artifacts meant more than collector's items. They were personal fragments of my family's story, now scattered to unknown bidders who viewed them as curiosities or worse, ritual objects. I spent the next several days filing police reports, contacting online marketplaces, and begging auction houses for information. Each lead hit a dead end. The auction sites insisted I needed proof of ownership, which I scrambled to provide with old photographs, insurance appraisals, and notarized affidavits. By the time I managed to freeze a few listings, the highest bidders had already whisked my locket and teacup away into private collections. The letters I mailed to Jordan, the letters my parents wrote during long-distance summers, were nowhere to be found. Someone had stripped the originals, leaving only photocopies. The more I pushed, the more I felt like I was chasing ghosts. I dug out every family photo, every dusty box in my attic, hoping to find duplicates I could offer in exchange. But no matter how many replicas I showed, no auction house would part with the actual items. The shock of betrayal turned into a dull ache. I kept thinking about Jordan's bright eyes as they listened to my stories, trusting me with their words, and how quickly that trust became a loophole for them to profit. These days, I'm hesitant to share anything personal with anyone. I've stopped posting photos of my apartment or my childhood souvenirs online. I carry my phone in airplane mode more often than not. When I walk past street art in a locked box or see a viral post about some underground art project, my chest tightens. I tell myself that objects are just things, replaceable and impersonal. But every time I cross a vintage shop or antique dealer, I wonder if they have a piece of my past tucked away, waiting for its owner to come knocking. There's no neat resolution here. No lesson spelled out in bold letters. My family's artifacts are out there somewhere, loved or loathed by strangers who never knew what those pieces truly meant. And I'm left with the echo of my own story, a reminder that not every romantic idea ends with a happy reveal. Sometimes it just ends with the realization that your trust can be packaged, shipped, and sold without a second thought. It started when I matched with Devin on a dating app that advertised like-minded explorers of heritage. Their profile was a collage of old family photos, dusty archives, and snapshots from historic cemeteries. I was fascinated. Genealogy had always been this hobby I kept to myself, filling spreadsheets with names and dates whenever I had a free weekend. When Devin messaged me asking if I'd been interested in a collaborative heritage research project, I didn't hesitate. The idea of digging into family roots with someone who actually knew what they were doing felt like a dream. Devin lived in a loft downtown that smelled faintly of parchment and coffee. Shelves were crammed with bound volumes of census records, maps with colored pins, and piles of letters and envelopes tied with ribbon. They greeted me by name, as if we'd been friends for years, and led me to a desk piled high with DNA kits. Devin had partnerships with a couple of labs offering advanced sequencing. They explained how they could trace not just broad ancestry, but specific genetic traits, blood types, predispositions to certain health conditions, even markers for eye and hair color. I thought it was harmless curiosity. After a few glasses of tea, I shipped off my saliva sample along with my mom's and dad's, all in the same package labeled Heritage Project. Devin promised to handle everything, to let me see whatever they uncovered. For the next week, I couldn't stop checking my email. Devin sent detailed charts showing matches with distant cousins in Ireland, a cluster of relatives in Eastern Europe, and some possible links to indigenous tribes on the West Coast. It felt like holding a piece of history in my hands. They'd built me a family tree that stretched back centuries, connecting me to people I'd never heard of, sharing stories about ancestors who'd fled famine or built homesteads on the frontier. I felt closer to my family than ever before. Devin's messages were frequent, full of enthusiasm, sending attachments of documents they'd found. Everything seemed above board. Then I saw a headline that changed everything. Research lab accused of unethical eugenics experiments. The story mentioned a private genetics company supplying data to a secretive institute where scientists were allegedly manipulating embryos based on genetic profiles. I skimmed the article, sick with dread, until I reached a photograph of Devin speaking at an academic conference. The caption called them collaborator and data facilitator. My chest tightened. I forwarded the article to Devin's email with a message asking for an explanation. There was no reply. Panic set in as I realized how much I'd given away. My saliva sample, along with my parents, was in the hands of people I hardly knew. I grabbed my phone and dialed Devin's number. It rang once and went to voicemail. I left a message demanding to know where my genetic data was and how it was being used. No call back. I messaged on the app as well, but Devin's profile had vanished. It felt like waking up from a dream to find someone had stolen your memories. I spent the rest of the day digging deeper. Every link I followed led back to the same names. The genetics company, a boutique research institute, a handful of obscure academic papers boasting about targeted trait selection in cell cultures. The more I read, the more it felt like a horror story. My own DNA had become a commodity, a string of letters in a database used for experiments I didn't consent to. I felt stripped naked, like someone else held the blueprint of my biology and could do whatever they wanted with it. That night, I called the consumer genetics lab that processed my kit. I explained that I needed my data deleted and all physical samples destroyed immediately. They sounded sympathetic but cautious. Company policy required signed consent forms, and they might have already forwarded my sample to the institute. They put me on hold for what felt like forever. When they came back, they said there was nothing they could do without a court order. My heart sank. I felt helpless knowing my genetic code could be sitting in a freezer somewhere, waiting for the next twisted application. Over the next few days, I filed complaints with data protection authorities, gave statements to consumer rights groups, even reached out to a civil rights lawyer. Each step was bogged down in red tape. Meanwhile, I kept finding more references to the Institute's pilot programs seeking volunteers for gene enhancement or trait optimization. Their recruitment ads sounded polite and academic, but beneath the surface, it was clear they were after vulnerable people willing to hand over their DNA for a few dollars or a vague promise of health insights. My family was furious when I told them. My mom accused me of being careless. My dad said he couldn't believe I'd been dumb enough to trust a random online match. I felt ashamed, angry at myself for letting curiosity override caution. We tried phoning the Institute directly, but calls were screened by automated systems. Emails bounced. Their website was slick, full of glossy images of lab coats and cell cultures, but no real contact information beyond a generic support address. At some point, I realized I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. I braced myself against a world where my most intimate biological details were out of my hands, potentially used to engineer traits in embryos or create personalized pharmaceuticals without my consent. I deleted all genealogy posts online, took down my family tree from public sites, and shut down social profiles. I even stopped wearing the medical alert bracelet I'd used for my peanut allergy because it included genetic markers. Everything connected to my DNA felt like a risk. Months later, I saw a trial announcement. Private Genetics Institute faces scrutiny over unauthorized experiments. I watched the courtroom sketches on the news, hoping for some vindication. The company's CEO claimed that all data was anonymized and used only for broad research, not linked to individual profiles. But hidden under layers of legal jargon were admissions that some data had been shared with third parties. There was no specific mention of my sample, of course, just an apology for unintended consequences. It felt like a slap in the face. Today, when I think back to that first coffee date, I don't remember Devin's smile or the excitement of discovering long-lost relatives. Instead, I feel a cold knot in my gut, a reminder that some doors shouldn't be opened. I still keep family photos on my phone, but I won't scan or share them. I left genealogy forums for good, unwilling to let my curiosity expose me again. My family's history is mine to protect now, whatever it takes, and I'll never hand over a DNA kit simply because someone asked. The story doesn't end with justice served or a neat solution. It ends with the uneasy knowledge that in the race to decode our past, we might be handing over too much control of our future. And that realization is what I carry with me every day. I never believed in ghosts until Naomi showed up at my door, claiming she could prove the paranormal was real. Her profile billed her as a paranormal investigator, and her messages oozed with confidence about catching spirits on camera. I'd just moved into a new apartment and felt its creaks and weird drafts were plenty spooky without any real hauntings. Still, I was curious. When she offered to set up her gear and host a haunted date night right here in my living room, I thought it would be a fun, harmless thrill, and maybe a cool story for my friends. Naomi arrived with a backpack full of gadgets, EMF detectors that looked like oversized remote controllers, suction cup mounts for little cameras, and a bulky night vision cam on a tripod. She laid out the gear like a mad scientist staging an experiment. I poured us wine as she plugged wires into wall outlets and taped sensors to corners of the ceiling. She explained that the EMF detectors would pick up spirit energy, the cameras would capture orbs or shadow figures, and the night vision would reveal anything hiding in the dark. Everything sounded high-tech and official, so I didn't question the dozens of tiny cameras she positioned around my place. Once everything was in place, Naomi dimmed the lights and handed me a remote linked to the EMF reader. She told me to walk through the apartment slowly, speaking softly into my phone's voice recorder. We laughed as the device beeped at random intervals. I leaned against the kitchen counter, half expecting a breeze to set it off. Naomi urged me into the bedroom, flicked off the last lamp, and whispered that this was where the strongest readings happened. My heart thumped when the reader flashed bright green. I joked that I must have left the microwave on in the hall, but Naomi nodded seriously, scribbling notes on a clipboard. As the night went on, she live-streamed our haunted date to her followers. I watched the viewer count climb on her tablet. 5, 20, 50 people tuned me in to watch me tiptoe through my own home. She narrated every beep and rustle as if it were a spine-tingling episode of a ghost show. When the bedroom sensor glowed red, she gasped and told everyone we were detecting a powerful presence. Adrenaline made me grin at first, but it turned chilly when I realized my neighbors or friends might actually be watching. Between segments, Naomi switched to night vision mode. Everything on the screen was bathed in eerie green, and I caught glimpses of my furniture in an alien light. She guided me to stand still while she panned the camera across the room. A few times the lens caught a shadow drifting in the corner of my vision. I chalked it up to my own silhouette or her shaky hands. But Naomi reacted like she'd spotted something real. A half-whispered, "Did you see that?" That made my skin crawl. When the streams ended, Naomi congratulated me on surviving my first encounter. She packed her gear with practiced efficiency, telling me she'd edit the footage into an episode for her channel. She promised to send me the link before it went public so I could share it on my own social media. I thought it was just part of the deal. Everyone loves a behind-the-scenes peek. I never stopped to wonder what footage she was keeping and how many angles she'd recorded me from. A few days later, I got a text from Naomi with a private link. I clicked it, expecting a fun montage of me freaking out at shadows. Instead, the video opened with a tight shot of my bed at night, the moonlight casting bars of light across my sheets. The camera stayed on me for hours as I tossed and turned, talking in my sleep and muttering half-formed dreams. I saw myself yawn, then roll over, then slump against the headboard. The worst part was the audio. Every whisper and groan picked up by her hidden microphones echoed through my headphones. My breath caught in my throat. She'd filmed me without my consent while I was completely unaware. I scrolled through the file list and saw dozens more clips. Me pacing in the kitchen early in the morning, brushing my teeth, adjusting the thermostat, even staring at my phone while half asleep. Naomi had cameras pointed at every private corner, bathroom doorway, closet entrance, under the dining table. It was like she made a private surveillance fortress out of my home, and she planned to broadcast or archive every moment. I tried calling her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I messaged her through the app, demanding she delete all the footage and remove her gear. No response. Panic turned into anger. I changed my locks and unplugged every unknown device I could find. I scoured my lease for clauses about unauthorized wiring or surveillance, planning to involve the landlord. Naomi's channel and social media profiles vanished, leaving no trace of her work or promises. It felt like she ghosted me, ironically the one thing I'd invited her to hunt. Every time I sit on my couch now, I glance at the corners, half expecting to find another tiny lens glinting back at me. I still wake up sometimes in the dark, my heart pounding as if I'm trapped in that night vision video. Trusting someone with gadgets and a promise of spooky fun turned out to be a terrible mistake. There was nothing supernatural in my apartment, except maybe the way fear can linger long after the cameras go dark. His profile billed him as a digital experience architect and promised a VR dating platform where you could meet anyone, anywhere, without leaving your couch. It sounded futuristic, even romantic. At first, I imagined strolling together through a moonlit Parisian street or dancing beneath digital cherry blossoms. When he invited me to be an early adopter and guided date number 7 in his beta tests, I was intrigued. Anything to escape the usual dinner and movie routine, right? The VR kit arrived in a sleek black box with glowing blue lines. Inside was the headset, 2 motion controllers, and a tidy instruction manual that looked more like a sci-fi novella. Ethan video called me from his home studio to guide me through the setup. He spoke in a calm, reassuring tone. Just follow my cues and I'll handle the rest. I slipped on the headset and immediately felt weightless, as if I were suspended in empty space. A floating menu appeared in front of me. Select your environment. Ethan's voice rang in my ears, telling me to choose Starlit Lagoon. I clicked, and suddenly I was standing on the shore of a glowing pool under a sky thick with stars. Ethan's avatar approached, looking like a pixel-perfect version of him in crisp linen shirt and casual jeans. He reached out and guided my virtual hand to his, and we began to walk along the water's edge. The scene was stunning, brilliant blue ripples, constellations overhead, soft music playing just out of sight. I felt a thrill at how immersive it was. We talked about our real lives, laughter echoing in the simulated night air. Time slipped by and I forgot where reality ended. He told me this date would last as long as I wanted. That invitation felt liberating, no rush to catch the last train home. Then Ethan asked if I'd like to see his signature experience. He led me through a shimmering portal that I'd barely noticed appear behind a cluster of virtual reeds. On the other side, everything went dark, the scene replaced by a blank void. My heart skipped. Ethan's voice sounded distant, his avatar's hand slipping away. I reached out, but my arm passed through his digital form like mist. A loading screen popped up. Experience beginning. I tapped the controller, but nothing happened. Panic fluttered in my chest as I tried to remove the headset. The strap wouldn't budge. A message scrolled across my vision. Log up disabled until session complete. My breath caught in my throat. I glanced around the void, and then the scene shifted again. violent flashes of my own memories replaying like a broken film reel. It started with a childhood birthday party, me blowing out candles, faces of friends pixelated, colors oversaturated. Then a more recent memory, me crying on my apartment floor, the sunlight off the windowsill glaring like a spotlight. I felt raw, exposed. Ethan's calm narration explained that this was the Fear feed, a custom module that could pull personal content and replay it to increase emotional engagement for an audience. I hadn't realized we were streaming. A panel appeared showing live viewer count climbing. 200, 500, 1,000 people watching me. My chest tightened. I tried to speak, but all I heard was the echo of my own voice bouncing back. The memories sped up, glitches warping the footage. I saw a version of myself as a digital puppet, limbs jerking uncontrollably. A haunting whisper ran through the audio channel, saying, "Stay a while." Tears welled up behind the lenses. I banged the side of the headset, shouting, "Let me out." My real-world arms flailed. The motion controllers slipped from my grasp and tumbled to the floor. In the void, I felt my heart racing, my breath ragged. The countdown timer appeared, session time remaining, 10 minutes. I thought I'd pass out before then. My stomach knotted, head pounding. The void suddenly collapsed into a new scene. The living room of my own apartment, rendered in horrible detail. My sofa, my coffee table, the book on the side left open. I watched as my own avatar slumped on that couch. Behind me, another avatar appeared. It was Ethan, but his face was a blank mask. 2 glowing eyes where his features should be. He drifted forward and sat next to my virtual body. I tried to move, but my legs felt like lead. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small playback device. With a click, he pressed a button and the TV in the room flickered on, showing my live stream face for face. The crowd count ticked upward again. Over 2,000 viewers now. I recognized the setup, a twisted theater where my humiliation was the show. The line between reality and VR blurred. I felt the weight of my real body on the couch, the straps of the headset pressing into my skull. Then a new prompt appeared, interact to proceed. I didn't understand what that meant. My panic threatened to drown me. Suddenly, I felt the real hand of my cat, jumping onto my lap. I mumbled his name. He meowed. Something clicked inside me, a spark of awareness that this was only a simulation. I grabbed one controller from my lap, raised it over my head instinctively, and slammed it down on the headset's sensor module. There was a crack of forced power down, lights flickered in my room, and I tumbled backward as the headset finally powered off. I lay there on the couch, panting and soaked in sweat. The controllers were silent on the floor. I peeled the headset off, hair matted, vision shaky. My phone buzzed, notifications from the VR app. A notification said, "Session ended, 2,143 viewers." Another message from Ethan read, "Thanks for participating. Data will be posted soon." Rage burned through my exhaustion. I deleted the app, smashed the headset against the floor until it sparked and sent a final fizz of smoke. I threw the pieces into a bag and carried it to recycling, my hands trembling. The next morning, I found news articles about a data leak. Users of Ethan's platform complained about being unable to log out unauthorized streaming emotional manipulation modules. The company behind it claimed beta issues and apologized, but I knew they were hiding the truth. My own red-eyed reflection in the mirror reminded me how quickly curiosity can become captivity when technology is in the wrong hands. I still wake up sometimes, convinced the VR world is opening back up. My dreams flicker with that void and the masked avatar of Ethan. But I've sworn off any virtual dates. I'll stick to real coffee shops and actual walks in the park. At least there, if someone tries something twisted, I can kick them in the shin and run away. I never thought a casual voice recording session could turn into the worst kind of invasion, but that's exactly how it went down. I matched with Maya through a creative networking site. She called herself a voice artist, specializing in authentic emotional reads for independent projects. Her profile showed cozy studio shots, vintage microphones, and quotes about the power of real confession. I'd been toying with the idea of recording a personal memoir piece, so when she offered to help capture my story in her home studio, it felt like a dream collaboration. Her studio was a snug room in the back of her apartment, soundproofed with foam panels and lit by warm desk lamps. Maya greeted me with a friendly smile and a clipboard full of scripts. She explained that she needed genuine emotion for her demo reel, so she wanted me to read aloud moments from my life, embarrassing, vulnerable, even shameful bits. I hesitated for a moment, then shrugged and said I trusted her professionalism. She slid a headset over my ears and handed me the script, saying, "Just speak from the heart." The first few takes were easy: childhood memories, funny anecdotes, little confessions I'd never posted on social media. Maya offered gentle encouragement between each take, praising my tone and timing. As the session progressed, her prompts grew more personal. She asked me to describe a private regret, a lie I told someone close. The more I spoke, the more exposed I felt. I convinced myself it was for art. I thought she'd edit out anything too sensitive. 20 minutes later, she smiled and said she had everything she needed. I thanked her, packed up, and walked home with a spring in my step, imagining how cool it would be to hear my own voice narrating my story like a podcast. 2 days later, I got a message from Maya. She'd finished the edits and sent me a link to listen. I clicked it in my living room, expecting a polished montage of my best moments. Instead, the track opened with my voice whispering the most intimate details I'd shared. The time I lied to my childhood best friend about why I skipped her birthday party, my panic at almost getting caught sneaking into my boss's office, a confession of a secret I kept from my partner. As the audio unfolded, a second track faded in beneath it, an ominous drone making every word sound like part of a horror game. My skin crawled. I scanned the timestamps and saw multiple layers. My voice, then synthetic echoes that morphed my words into threats. "I know what you did," roared in my own tone, followed by "Don't tell anyone or else." My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I clicked away, but the link kept playing in a browser tab I hadn't noticed. I closed the window, but it had already autosaved on my desktop. There was a folder labeled Confessions. Inside, dozens of clips I hadn't recorded in front of her, spliced together to make it sound like I'd begged for forgiveness. I called Maya, demanding she delete the files. Her voicemail picked up with a chirpy, "Hey, it's Maya. I'm probably mixing vocals. Leave a message." I left a calm message, explaining how the edits were unacceptable and asked her to remove everything immediately. No response. I texted her to the app. The messages showed unread. My blood ran cold as I realized her equipment must include more than a basic recorder. She had exact copies of my raw recordings, and she used voice manipulation software to layer deepfake clips on top, turning my voice against me. Over the next hour, my phone buzzed with new emails. Each one had a short clip attached and a subject line: "Delete your accounts. Pay up or I'll post. Everyone will hear the truth." Clicking them played my distorted voice saying things I'd never admitted to anyone. Blackmail. Panic slammed into me like a train. My partner called just then, worried. I had to play it cool, but my mind raced. I knew if those clips went public, they'd destroy my reputation and relationships. And there was no way to prove I wasn't the one who created them. I spent the evening frantically researching, discovering that voice synthesis tools could imitate any inflection if you gave them enough source recordings. Maya must have used my genuine takes to train a model and generated the threatening phrases. She'd set up an automated system to email me whenever I didn't reply. My stomach churned. I didn't know she was watching me in real time or had a schedule for unleashing more. I changed my passwords, deleted every social account, and considered blocking my own email address. It felt like living in a cell. At 3 a.m., I got another email. "Someone's listening right now." It contained a live audio link. My own voice whispered through the speakers. "She's alone, you know." I realized Maya must have installed malware on my laptop during this session, recording ambient sound so she could tell when I was home. Terror settled in my bones. I grabbed my laptop and phone, threw them in a duffel bag, and drove to a friend's place across town. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My entire life felt splintered. By morning, I filed a police report and reached out to a cyber forensics team. They confirmed the worst. Maya had cloned my voice, embedded tracking software, and set a timed release for the deepest manipulations. The files weren't just audio. They were keys to an identity theft nightmare. I spent weeks in legal limbo, changing everything tied to my name, from bank accounts to medical records. I went to therapy to calm the dread that settled in my throat. I keep my windows open now to hear real-life sounds, hoping they'll remind me someone else can't hijack my own voice. I never got an apology or a refund for the recording fee I paid. A final message to Maya went unanswered. Sometimes I walk past recording studios and flinch, imagining her waiting inside with a memory stick full of my secrets. Trusting someone with your personal confessions felt like a gift, but for her, it was a weapon. There's no neat ending, just the echo of my own voice turned into blackmail and the realization that in the wrong hands, even your words can betray you. I've been staring at that stubborn drip in my ceiling for 2 weeks before I finally decided to call someone. Water stains were spreading across the hallway, and I'd exhausted every YouTube tutorial on DIY fixes. Then I matched with Caleb on a local service app. His profile was full of before and after photos of bathroom makeovers and glowing 5-star reviews. When he offered to come by that same afternoon, I was relieved. It felt like my luck was finally turning around. Caleb showed up at exactly 3, tool belt slung low on his hips, carrying a bright orange toolbox. He had a confident grin and wore a shirt that said, "Fix it first time." We shook hands in my living room, and I pointed out the stained ceiling panel. He climbed the ladder with practiced ease, poked around with a moisture meter, then smiled and said he'd replace the damaged drywall, seal any leaks, and even install smart sensors to monitor humidity so I'd never have this problem again. I was sold. I watched him work for a couple hours, mixing joint compound, cutting new panels, tightening pipes. The living room filled with the smell of fresh paint and sawdust, and I thought about how nice it'd be to stop worrying every time it rained. The next morning, I noticed small white squares on the walls near my door, behind my couch, even in the hallway. They looked like smoke detectors but had tiny holes in the center. I asked Caleb about them when he came back to touch up the paint. He said they were smart environmental sensors, measuring temperature, humidity, and air quality. I barely paid attention as he explained they'd sync to an app so I could track everything from my phone. It sounded handy, and I figured I'd delete the app once the leak was fixed. Over the next few days, I downloaded the app and saw clean graphs showing stable humidity and perfect airflow. I tried to use the sensors for fun, checking room temperatures before guests arrived, turning on the heater remotely when the hallway dipped below 20 degrees, bragging about my smart apartment. Caleb popped by twice more, replaced a valve under the sink, tightened some fittings in the bathroom, and reminded me the sensors would automatically alert me if anything went wrong. He logged into the app on my phone one last time, tapped through settings, and said, "All good. You're set." Then he gave me a friendly wave and disappeared. Things started to feel off when my phone buzzed at 2 in the morning with a notification. Living room motion detected. Bleary-eyed, I unlocked the app and saw a blurred outline of what looked like my own shadow moving in front of sensor number 3. The timestamp was half an hour ago. I zoomed out on the graph and saw spikes of motion every night around 2 to 3. I chalked it up to my cat pacing around or me rolling over and accidentally crossing the sensor's field. I set the app on silent and tried to ignore it. A week later, I got an email with a link titled Nightly Footage. I clicked it, expecting a blank video or a notification that no cameras were installed. Instead, a grainy clip loaded showing my living room at 2:30 in the morning. I watched as someone, I realized quickly it was me, stepped out of bed, padded down the hall, and switched on the kitchen light. The footage was silent, shot from the corner near the ceiling. My heart hammered when I noticed multiple angles available in the player, 8 camera feeds, each named for the sensor locations. Every room in my flat was covered: bedroom, bathroom, hall, even my home office. I rewound and watched myself open the fridge, then head back to bed, all captured in perfect clarity. Panic tightened my chest. I scrolled down the email and saw daily clips attached, motion events. There were 10 videos from last night and dozens more from the past week. I felt sick. Caleb had installed hidden cameras inside those smart sensors. They weren't just monitoring humidity, they were silently filming me around the clock. He must have swapped out genuine environmental sensors for dual-purpose devices that recorded video. The worst part, the email was from a generic address, not Caleb's personal email. Someone else was collecting the footage, sending it to me like a sick trophy. I installed the app, deleted the email, and tossed my phone onto the couch. My hands shook as I paced the living room, imagining how long this had been going on. Why send me the footage? Was this a mistake or a threat? I checked all the sensors on the walls. The squares seemed too sturdy to pry open. I messed with covers and screws, but nothing budged. It was like they were welded in place. My mind raced. Did Caleb have copies of my keys? Could he have installed additional hidden devices behind furniture? I realized I was living inside a spy network of my own home. The next morning, I called Caleb's number from my office phone. It rang once, then went to voicemail. No call back. I sent him a text demanding he remove every sensor and delete all footage immediately. No reply. I tried the service app where I'd booked him. His profile was gone, reviews deleted, contact info vanished. I felt stranded. I spent the weekend ripping my closet apart, looking for extra cameras. Under lamps, behind picture frames, inside vents. Every corner got inspected. I even ordered a bug sweeper device online, scanning for wireless signals. It picked up devices broadcasting on local channels, but when I got close to the sensors, it only showed standard Zigbee and Wi-Fi communications. Nothing that screamed camera. It was like the gear was custom built to mask its tracks. By Monday, I realized I couldn't live like this. I needed help. I moved into a friend's spare room and called the police. I handed them the footage file, the email headers, and descriptions of the sensor installations. The officers were polite but skeptical. Without peeling those devices off the walls, they couldn't prove the cameras existed. They suggested hiring a private investigator or a tech forensics team. My savings evaporated on consultations and diagnostic tests. Everything confirmed my suspicion. Those sensors had microlenses hidden behind inconspicuous holes. Meanwhile, the footage kept arriving. Every morning, I found new clips in my email, my kitchen at lunch, my bathroom in the afternoon, me working on my laptop late at night. It didn't send me an explicit threat, but the message was clear. They could watch me anytime. I turned off notifications, but that didn't stop the emails stacking up in my inbox. I tried blocking the address, but they kept sending from rotating aliases. It felt like a game of cat and mouse with my privacy as the prize. Eventually, I had to do something drastic. I took a week off work, hired a team to decommission every sensor, rewire the walls, replace paneling, and install only verified secure devices. They found camera boards soldered into the sensor modules, tiny microphones tucked behind drywall. By the end of the week, my flat looked like new, and the weird squares were gone. I moved back in and changed all my locks. I now sweep every room for bugs, invest in encrypted communications, and avoid hiring anyone without in-person interviews. I still wake up sometimes thinking I hear the hum of a hidden camera or the click of a remote upload. It's been months, and I'm only just learning to relax again. My apartment feels safe now, but the memory of being watched will stick with me forever.